The Lord of the Rings is unquestionably a staple of the fantasy genre. Since its publishing in 1954, people have fallen in love with this land of magic, full of creatures and kings and unlikely heroes. A story of victory against overwhelming evil despite all odds, and a tragedy about the cost of this evil being the dwindling of all of the magic that remained in the earth. The story of The Lord of the Rings takes place towards the end of the Third Age of Middle-earth, and by that time already much that was magical about this land has already long faded away. And yet there are traces spread throughout this fantasy epic, little glimpses, little windows into the world as it used to be. Frequent mentions of an ancient civilization called Numenor. Tales from characters like Treebeard of a time when the elves used to walk the land, teaching their language to the trees and learning the language of the trees in turn. A time before they retreated into their cities or crossed the Great Sea, never again to return. Ancient ruins like Weathertop and the hills that were once the great city of Eregion. Songs and poems of characters like Beren and Luthien or the mighty Gil-galad, or Hurin, the strongest man to ever live. The Lord of the Rings is an epic conclusion to a history that was millennia in the making. But it is very clear that Tolkien had this history in the forefront of his mind while writing this fantasy story, when building the world as it was in the Third Age. Scattered notes that he had written from 1917 all the way up until his death in 1973. Collections of notes, writings, and poems that were collected, compiled, and edited by his son Christopher Tolkien, and was published posthumously or posthumously as the Silmarillion. The Silmarillion, in its essence, is a combination of a historical textbook and a Bible of sorts. It documents the creation of the world, which is called Arda, and documents its entire history. Primarily the history of the First Age, though it does also briefly tackle the Second and Third Ages of the world. And it's that history that I want to talk about. The Silmarillion contains some very powerful stories, as well as rich characters. Characters that, in my mind, are some of the greatest in the entire Tolkien legendarium. But because that story is presented like a historical text, rather than a traditional narrative, it is a text that some readers can and have struggled with. And so I am going to be going through the Silmarillion chapter by chapter, breaking down the vibrant lore and history of this magical world. And we're going to be breaking that history up into a series of videos for the channel. Firstly, because this channel has been needing a good lore series for quite some time, and secondly, in the hope that this will not devolve into a hazy soup of the names of people and places, instead consisting of chapters with one-off or frequently reoccurring characters. Each entry in this rich history will be given the attention and love that it deserves. And of course, once we conclude this series, I will compile all of these videos into one mega video that will be my coverage of the Silmarillion and the history of Arda. I did at one point have a video that I was writing the script for that would kind of be like a Lord of the Rings primer for people who were maybe unfamiliar with the story or wanted to get to know the backdrop of the Lord of the Rings a bit better. But in the end, that script kind of went all over the place, pulling names of people and places out of nowhere, and it was quite a mess. So instead, I'm just going to do this series about the Silmarillion, and I'm going to be talking about it in the order that it is presented within the story. The bulk of the Silmarillion is a text that is known in the narrative as the Quenta Silmarillion. This is the history of the Silmarils, a powerful artifact that we will come to know later in this series. But that is not the whole Silmarillion, because there are two documents that cover the prehistory of Arda, and there are two entries after the Quenta Silmarillion that discuss the important events of the Second Age, and then of course a third and final chapter covering the Rings of Power, which came about in the Third Age. And through the course of this series, we will be going through all of these sordid tales in order, beginning with the two entries that precede the Quenta Silmarillion, the Ainulindalë and The Valaquenta. The Ainulindalë is the story of the creation of Arda. Translated, that word comes to mean the music of the Ainur, and exactly what that means we will get into later. But this is the creation mythos for the land of not just Middle-earth, but Arda as a whole. I keep wanting to say Middle-earth because that's the name that people know, but Middle-earth is just one continent in the world that is Arda. And because of Tolkien's Catholic faith, there is certainly some inspiration taken from the Judeo-Christian creation mythos in order to construct his own, but there are significant creative departures as well. And the chapter that comes after it, the Valaquenta, is a collection of additional information about the Valar. But you might be asking, who are the Valar? Don't worry about it, we're gonna get to it. And this first video, the video that you are watching right now, is going to be covering both the Ainulindalë and the Valaquenta. Because personally, I think it makes the most sense to discuss these two chapters together. I'm not sure if I'm going to be doing this with other chapters going forward, but it made the most sense for these two chapters. And before we begin, I have a quick note about the pronunciations that I'm about to use for a lot of the names of people and places. Normally, my philosophy when it comes to pronouncing names that I may not know is to either just stumble through it for the comedy of the situation, or simply say it with confidence and make people believe you. However, my copy of the Silmarillion does in fact include a guide and specific notes on pronunciations. So I can say with absolute confidence that yes, I am saying all of these right. For example, when I first saw the word Ainulindalë, I initially pronounced it Ainulindalë because that sounded the most accurate to me, but after consulting the book, it is the Ainulindalë. And so with all that said, thank you so much for watching, and let's dive into the first chapter in the prehistory of Arda, the Ainulindalë. These are the opening lines of the Silmarillion documenting the creation story. There was Eru, the One, who in Arda is called Ilúvatar, and he made first the Ainur, the Holy Ones, that were the offspring of his thought, and they were with him before aught else was made. And he spoke to them, propounding to them themes of music, and they sang before him, and he was glad. But for a long while they sang only each alone, or but few together, while the rest hearkened. For each comprehended only that part of the mind of Ilúvatar from which he came, and in the understanding of their brethren they grew but slowly. Yet ever as they listened, they came to deeper understanding, and increased in unison and harmony. In the beginning there was Eru Ilúvatar, the supreme creator god of this mythos. And you will hear most Tolkien experts referring to him as Eru Ilúvatar, but those are actually two different names, Eru and Ilúvatar. Eru simply meaning the one, in other words, the one above all, the god of this world. And in the realm of Arda, which is yet to be, he would be called Ilúvatar, a title that is most comparable to the Norse idea of All-Father, the title given to Odin. Eru is omniscient, omnipresent, and omnipotent. He existed before all else was made. And Eru possessed something that was referred to as the Flame Imperishable, or the Secret Fire. Yes, this is the very same sacred fire that Gandalf invoked in his fight with Durin's Bane. In fact, there he is. Physically, it is described like a cloud with a living heart of flame. The Flame Imperishable is the untamed spirit of creation itself. Nothing can be created in this universe lest it be through the Flame Imperishable. In Tolkien's cosmic hierarchy, this Flame Imperishable is most akin to the Holy Spirit. Sort of. Not really, but sort of. It is separate from Eru, and yet it is part of him. And from the thought of Ilúvatar came the Ainur, who are called the Holy Ones, divine spirits with inherent power and yet less than Ilúvatar. And the Ainur are not created equally in terms of their power scaling, and each represents a different thought or aspect of the mind of Ilúvatar. Specifically in that quote that I just read regarding the Ainur, for each comprehended only that part of the mind of Ilúvatar from which he came. Each is gifted in specific areas or have specific talents, or even represent a different force of nature or aspect of the natural world. Each of the Ainur came from a different aspect of Ilúvatar, and so each contributes to a partial picture of Ilúvatar himself. And in the language around the Ainur for most of this chapter, it is very specific about referring to all of them by the masculine he, and we will come back to that idea before the end of this chapter. And so with this new heavenly host gathered about him, what was the first thing that Ilúvatar did? Well, he taught them to sing. And sang they did, but when they sang alone, or often in small groups, while each listened to the music the other was making. And through this communication through song, they grew to understand each other more deeply. And this was just the warm-up. After a time of existing like this, Eru gathered them all before him once more. And with them all assembled there, he sang to them his own song, a song so beautiful that all of them were moved and the heavens were silent. But this was not meant to be a one-off solo performance. For afterwards, Ilúvatar commanded each and every one of them to take up the song. Then Ilúvatar said to them, "Of the theme that I have declared to you, I will now that ye make in harmony together a great music. And since I have kindled you with the flame imperishable, ye shall go forth your powers in adorning this theme, each with his own thoughts and devices, if he will. But I will sit and hearken, and be glad that through you great beauty has been wakened into song." He empowers all of the Ainur gathered in front of him with some aspect of the flame imperishable, giving his creation the ability to themselves create. He did not want to sing the song himself, but rather teach it to his creation. And then each of them would take up the song, adding their own unique voice and embellishments to the greater theme. And at this point, he did not yet reveal his true purpose behind this. And so the Ainur began to sing the song of Ilúvatar, and that melody was made all the more beautiful by their voices. Each added their own personal touches, weaving harmony and melody together, until that great music filled the halls of Ilúvatar and spilled out into the void. The void is just the name for the emptiness that existed before creation. It's also mentioned in passing, but after creating the Ainur, Ilúvatar made a place for them within this void, the halls of Ilúvatar. This is the heavenly realms where Ilúvatar and the Ainur dwell. Never since have the Ainur made any music like to this music, though it has been said that a greater still shall be made before Ilúvatar by the choirs of the Ainur and the children of Ilúvatar after the end of days. Then the themes of Ilúvatar shall be played aright, and take being in the moment of their utterance, for all shall then understand fully his intent in their part, and each shall know the comprehension of each. And Ilúvatar shall give to their thoughts the secret fire, being well pleased. So already in this creation mythos, we are getting a glimpse at what the end of days may look like, where the Ainur and the children of Ilúvatar all are gathered before him, each fully comprehending the melody of Ilúvatar, in which is contained the understanding of the universe and of creation itself. But who are the children of Ilúvatar? Don't worry about that yet, we'll get to it. Eru sits and watches the Ainur weave their melody around him, and he is well pleased. But all is not well for long. We then cut to a very specific Ainur spirit by the name of Melkor. Melkor was the most powerful of the Ainur. To him was given a double portion of knowledge and strength, and he also shared a portion in the gifts of all the other Ainur. And yet this was not enough for him. Melkor wanted to change the melody in order to bring more honor and glory to himself. And it is said that before this, he often wandered the void alone, seeking the flame imperishable, wishing to possess it for himself. And he never found it, for the flame is ever at the side of Ilúvatar. There is nothing wrong with his inherent desire to create, and that's very explicit in the text going forward, as well as life in general. Creation is a beautiful aspect of being on planet Earth. But where this desire became warped and twisted was his desire to create as a means of building himself up and bringing honor and glory to him above all else. And he also was impatient. He looked out into the void and often wished to make something of it, and to his eye it seemed that Eru did nothing. He did not yet perceive the greater plan or his role within it, and in his haste he sought to defy God. And so Melkor started to weave his own thoughts into the melody, creating discord and dissonance. His disturbance was great enough that the Ainur faltered in their song. Others tried to salvage the melody by beginning to harmonize with Melkor, rather than continuing the melody that each had started. And as a result, the pleasant melody of the Ainur became like a turbulent storm, which filled the halls of Ilúvatar and swirled about his throne. And in response to this, Ilúvatar simply smiled. And so Eru and Melkor fought for the song of the Ainur. And I'm going to read this whole section because it's really good. Then Ilúvatar rose, and the Ainur perceived that he smiled, and he lifted up his left hand, and a new theme began amid the storm, like and yet unlike to the former theme, and it gathered power and had new beauty. But the discord of Melkor rose in uproar and contended with it, and again there was a war of sound more violent than before, until many of the Ainur were dismayed and sang no longer, and Melkor had the mastery. Then again Ilúvatar arose, and the Ainur perceived that his countenance was stern, and he lifted up his right hand, and behold, a third theme grew amid the confusion, and it was unlike the others. For it seemed at first soft and sweet, a mere rippling of gentle sounds in delicate melodies, but it could not be quenched, and it took to itself power and profundity. And it seemed at last that there were two musics progressing at one time before the seat of Ilúvatar, and they were utterly at variance. The one was deep and wide and beautiful, but slow and blended with an immeasurable sorrow, from which its beauty chiefly came. The other had now achieved a unity of its own, but it was loud and vain and endlessly repeated, and it had little harmony, but rather a clamorous unison, as of many trumpets braying upon a few notes. And it essayed to drown the other music by the violence of its voice, but it seemed that its most triumphant notes were taken by the other and woven into its own solemn pattern. In the midst of this strife, whereat the halls of Ilúvatar shook and a tremor ran out into the silences, yet unmoved, Ilúvatar arose a third time, and his face was terrible to behold. Then he raised up both his hands, and in one final chord, deeper than the abyss, higher than the firmament, piercing as the light of the eye of Ilúvatar, the music ceased. I absolutely love the language of this passage, but specifically around Eru's treatment of Melkor. If it wasn't clear at this point, Melkor is basically being set up as the adversary, as the devil in the Tolkien mythology. Once just an angel like the rest, but he became prideful and rebelled against his creator. Yet despite this open defiance by Melkor, Eru clearly still has love for Melkor, a child that he created. And his treatment of Melkor's rebellion in this moment really does reflect the love that a father has for a disobedient child. First, he responds with love, gently guiding the melody back to where it is meant to go. And when that doesn't work, he responds more sternly, creating a new melody that, while still retaining its original beauty, begins to draw power unto itself, like a loving but stern warning. And when Melkor continues to defy him, he finally drops the hammer. He unleashes a powerful chord, terrible and dreadful, described as both the highest and the lowest chord that ever was struck. Imagine a chord containing every single note. Not just every note on the human spectrum of hearing, but the sound of every sound ever made at once. A chord that shocks the heavens into silence, and the eyes of Ilúvatar are terrible to behold. And after this long silence, Eru speaks. Then Ilúvatar spoke, and he said, "Mighty are the Ainur, and mightiest among them is Melkor, but that he may know, and all the Ainur, that I am Ilúvatar. Those things that ye have sung, I will show them forth, that ye may see what ye have done. And thou, Melkor, shalt see that no theme may be played that hath not its uttermost source in me, nor can any alter the music in my despite. For he that attempteth this shall prove but mine instrument in the devising of things more wonderful, which he himself hath not imagined." This is a very important sentiment in understanding Tolkien's ideas of evil, not just in his universe, but in his overall cosmic beliefs. And that is the fundamental idea that evil is incapable of creation. All it is capable of is twisting and warping what was initially made good. And there are several examples of this throughout the entire Silmarillion as well as The Lord of the Rings. But also branching out from this idea comes the idea that there is no evil act that cannot be taken and used for good. Melkor sought to defy Ilúvatar with his own melody. But as Eru is about to show all of the Ainur, all his attempts to build his own creation have only served to glorify Eru's grand design. No thing was created except through Eru, and Eru is unwilling to create evil. And so Ilúvatar stands and leads the Ainur out into the void, and they are all very nervous. Melkor himself is ashamed for the part that he played in this rebellion. By that I mean he orchestrated the rebellion. But that shame is quickly hardened into anger, and his defiance is not yet over. It is here in the middle of the void that Ilúvatar reveals to the Ainur the true purpose behind their song. But when they were come into the void, Ilúvatar said to them, "Behold your music." And he showed to them a vision, giving to them sight where before was only hearing. And they saw a new world made visible before them, and it was globed amid the void, and it was sustained therein, but was not of it. And as they looked and wondered, this world began to unfold its history, and it seemed to them that it lived and grew. And when the Ainur had gazed for a while and were silent, Ilúvatar said again, "Behold your music. This is your minstrelsy, and each of you shall find contained herein, amid the design that I have set before you, all those things which may seem that he himself devised or added. And thou, Melkor, wilt discover all the secret thoughts of thy mind, and wilt perceive that they are but a part of the whole and tributary to its glory." Eru shows them all a vision of the world Arda that is yet to come. But it is a world that their music has brought into existence. And at this, the Ainur finally comprehend Eru's purpose for them. This was the song of creation, the Ainulindalë. And rather than sing the melody for himself, out of love for his creation, he gave them the song to sing, and enough of the flame imperishable to make them the creators of this world. They sang the song, and the song created the world. And because of what Eru told them during this vision, and their own knowledge of their contributions to the greater melody, this is how the Ainur have a detailed knowledge of the past, present, and future of the world. Though not all is visible to them, that is very explicitly outlined. The overall grand design of Ilúvatar is not fully revealed to them, and events that work towards that greater end are also a mystery to them. And what they saw of this creation was beautiful, and not just for the land itself. They also saw in this vision the awakening of the children of Ilúvatar. These children were not created by the Ainur during their song, but were rather the creation of Ilúvatar himself. In that final chord that silenced the heavens was sown their creation. The children of Ilúvatar are the two primary peoples found in the land of Arda, elves and men. The Ainur perceive these children and they see within them the melody of their creator. And they begin to love this foretold creation and realize that the purpose of their song was to build a paradise for them. And from this love, many of the most powerful of the Ainur began to bend all of their thought towards this new creation. They want nothing more than to enter this world and make it a paradise for the children of Ilúvatar. And among those willing to go into the world is Melkor, although for less than noble goals. He sees the coming of this new creation, elves and men, and wants nothing more than to be worshipped by them as a god. He wishes to receive all honor and glory, and subjugate these creatures in order to serve him. But the rest of the Ainur looked upon this world with the mountains and the sky and the grass, and they loved it even more. But most of all, they loved the sea. It was said by the elves, the first elves to ever awaken in the earth, that contained within the waters of Arda was the last echoes of the song of the Ainur that sang the world into being. And ever afterwards, both elves and men felt a call to the sea in some way, although they could never articulate why. Like I said, each Ainur contributed their own thoughts into the world as it was shown, not knowing, of course, that this song was going to be the formation of a whole new world. And here's where we start getting into the domain of names. Don't worry, the Ainulindalë only mentions a few names. I make zero promises about the Valaquenta. In this section, we kind of get introduced to the big three of the Ainur. Kind of like Zeus, Poseidon, and Hades, whose domain encompasses the skies, the seas, and the underworld. Though it's technically not as cut and dry as that sounds, because each of the Ainur did contribute to the whole melody. So the boundaries aren't as cut and dry, and technically all of this was done through the flame imperishable, which is solely bound to Eru.
Get on with it! Yes, get on with it!
All the rivers and bodies of water in the earth were born from the thought of an Ainur spirit by the name of Ulmo. And the airs and skies of the world drew the attention of Manwe, the noblest of the Ainur and spiritual brother to Melkor. But to the earth and the roots that go deep under the earth was given to the thought of Aule. Aule was given by Ilúvatar immense skill in craftsmanship, seconded only to Melkor. But whereas Melkor would obsess and covet his created work, Aule's love was given to crafting itself. He would make a wonderful thing and then he would move on to the next. So those are kind of the big three. We have Manwe in the skies, Ulmo in the waters, and Aule in the mountains and the roots of the earth. So there's not really an underworld, but there is kind of a Hades equivalent, and we're gonna get to him. But then, as they are all still beholding this vision out in the void, Ilúvatar speaks directly to Ulmo. He shows him that despite how hard Melkor sought to dominate the song, it has only made the waters of creation, the waters that Ulmo loves so much, even more beautiful. Melkor's thoughts brought cold into the world, yet that cold gave beauty to the waters through frost and snow. Melkor conceived raging fires to extinguish all that was good in the melody, yet this heat created the clouds and rain, which would draw Ulmo closer to Manwe in the domain of the heavens. Already, the evils that Melkor tried to work into the melody are only serving to glorify Eru and this perfect creation. Ulmo sees this and says that his domain is far more beautiful than he could ever have imagined. But as the Ainur are gazing at this vision in wonder, it is ripped from them. And for the first time, the Ainur truly comprehend the darkness that they had dwelt in. It was a beautiful vision, but it was just that. merely a vision of what is to come. And once again, Eru makes a final declaration to the Ainur. Then there was unrest among the Ainur, but Ilúvatar called to them and said, I know the desire of your minds, that what ye have seen should verily be, not only in your thought, but even as ye yourselves are, and yet other. Therefore I say, Ea, let these things be. And I will send forth into the void the flame imperishable, and it shall be at the heart of the world, and the world shall be. Notice how be is capitalized, and those of you that will may go down into it. And suddenly the Ainur saw afar off a light, as it were a cloud with a living heart of flame, and they knew that this was no vision only, but Ilúvatar had made a new thing, Ea, the world that is. The shape and foundation of the world was set by the Ainur, and Eru gives it life, placing the flame imperishable, this primordial creative source, at its heart. And he called this creation Ea, the world that is. Again, is and be being capitalized. This was the holy action of Ilúvatar, breathing life into this creation that his children had made. And from here, I want to quickly touch on the geography and the cosmology of the world of this mythos. Because while I love the poetic language in this chapter, it can be very easy to get lost in it. So we have the void, which is the nothingness that existed before creation. And whether after the creation of the Ainur or whether this domain always existed, there is also the Halls of Ilúvatar. This is basically heaven and the heavenly throne where Eru and the Ainur dwell, and the Halls of Ilúvatar also exist in this void seemingly. But within this void, the world is also created. And Ilúvatar calls it Ea, referring to the world that is made alive with the flame imperishable. And the Valar step into this raw creation, and we'll get into who the Valar are, and they transform it into a land that is ready for the children of Ilúvatar, and they call this place Arda. Arda is the planet, the world that this story takes place in. And for the purposes of the legendarium that Tolkien made, there are two major continents. To the west, there is Aman, which is also called Valinor. This is the Undying Lands, where the elves dwell ever in the light of the Valar. This is also where Frodo and Bilbo are invited to travel after the events of Lord of the Rings. That whole very emotional scene where he gets on the ship and sails off into the sunset, he's going to Valinor, which is also Aman. And to the east lies the continent of Enor or Endor, depending on which elven language you speak, but it is of course better known as Middle-earth. Most of the stories in Tolkien's legendarium, including The Hobbit and The Lord of the Rings, take place in Middle-earth, specifically in the westernmost regions of Middle-earth. As you can clearly see in this map over here, there are clearly lands to the north, the east, and the south of what we conceive of when we think of Middle-earth, but they don't really play a huge role in the greater Tolkien legendarium, beyond of course Lord of the Rings, where Sauron musters to himself armies from the lands of Rhûn to the east and from Harad to the south. Middle-earth was created to be just as perfect as Valinor was, but as we are going to see in future installments of this series, it is very much not. And separating the continents of Aman and Enor is the Great Sea, or the Sundering Sea, which is the domain of the Valar Olmo. He does also occasionally travel inland through rivers, streams, springs of water, all fall under his domain. But he can mainly be found in the deep, deep ocean. So hopefully that clears up a general geography of Middle-earth as well as the greater cosmology of this greater story. And now back to your regularly scheduled creation mythos. Some of the Ainur choose to remain in the Halls of Ilúvatar, dwelling with Eru forever, but some do choose to step into this creation out of love for it and for the children of Ilúvatar. This included many of the most powerful of the Ainur. Eru therefore saw fit that their powers be bound to this creation. They are still immortal and they have all of the powers that they did as Ainur, but once they step in, they are bound to this creation and cannot leave, at least not until the world has run its course. These super powerful Ainur who step into creation and are then bound to its fate are then called the Valar, the powers of the world. And the Valar enter this new world and are surprised and disappointed, because instead of the glamorous paradise that they had seen in the vision, the world that they see in front of them is dark and empty. What they had seen was a vision of the world yet to come, and it is their job to build it. And so the Valar spend countless eons shaping the land for the children of Iluvatar. And the majority of this work is completed by the big three that I just mentioned: Manwë in the skies, Ulmo in the waters, and Aule of the earth. And like I also mentioned, of the Ainur who stepped into creation and became Valar, Melkor was one of them. And originally, he did so thinking that he would also help in shaping this new creation. But ultimately, he was only fooling himself. See, he still desired dominion and domination over this world, and eventually the mask slipped. Whatever the Valar tried to create, he would try and warp to serve his own purposes. And during this time, he raised great fires that swept the land. And eventually, finally, Melkor makes his great move. And by that I mean he literally just stands up in the middle of this blazing inferno he's created and just boldly declares,
"This whole land is mine. I claim it. I am god of this earth."
Manwë hears this and is having absolutely none of it. And so he musters the full might of the Valar as well as many of the Ainur still dwelling with Iluvatar, and they make war against Melkor. Eventually, they drive him back and he retreats, though he never forgets his idea of conquest. But for a time, there is peace as he sits in one corner of the world, just kind of festering, and fires all around him, the usual thing. And with him gone, the Valar continued their work. And many of the Valar became so enamored with the visions that they had seen of the coming of the children of Iluvatar that many decided to take physical shape after them, taking on physical form, although of course far greater in power and splendor than even the elves. Because that's very explicitly mentioned in this chapter. They don't necessarily, when entering the world, have to take on an anthropomorphized form, but they do, many do. But they can also pass through the world completely invisible to most creatures, or they can take on these extremely powerful and tall divine forms that just like terrify you and melt your brain, that whole thing. And remember a while ago when I said that while in the halls of Iluvatar, the Ainur were all referred to collectively by the masculine he? Now we get some clarification on the concept of gender within the Valar. Now the Valar took to themselves shape and hue, and because they were drawn into the world by love of the children of Iluvatar for whom they hoped, they took shape after that manner which they had beheld in the vision of Iluvatar, save only in majesty and splendor. Moreover, their shape comes of their knowledge of the visible world rather than of the world itself. And they need it not, save only as we use raiment, and yet we may be naked and suffer no loss of our being. In other words, the Valar put on a physical form in the same way that you and I put on clothes. Optional, but it's kind of nice to have them. Therefore the Valar may walk, if they will, unclad, and then even the Eldar cannot clearly perceive them, though they be present. But when they desire to clothe themselves, the Valar take upon them forms, some as of male and some as of female. For that difference of temper they had even from their beginning, and it is but bodied forth in the choice of each, not made by the choice, even as with us male and female may be shown by the raiment, but is not made thereby. But the shapes wherein the great ones array themselves are not at all times like to the shapes of the kings and queens of the children of Iluvatar, for at times they may clothe themselves in their own thought, made visible in forms of majesty and dread. So already within the halls of Iluvatar, some of the Ainur had a temperament that was more masculine and others more feminine. And when they took on physical form, that form reflected that nature. But that nature always existed, even from the beginning. And beyond that, like is said in the text, they can clothe themselves in their own thought, taking on these terrifying divine forms that I talked about. Ulmo most often manifests in that form. He doesn't very often take on human form. And the Valar gathered other spirits unto themselves, and they began the work of shaping Arda. and they describe this paradise in the text as like a massive garden. Melkor saw this and how they had begun to walk the earth in physical form and became very angry. And so he descended on them, taking this extremely terrifying form of wrath. Imagine the concept of wrath. He looks like that. And with this began the first great battle of the Valar against Melkor for dominion of Arda. And of this battle, little was shared by the Valar to the elves, because of course the only reason that the elves have record of this prehistory is that the Valar told them. I guess I didn't mention it, but the Silmarillion is part of the Great Red Book, or the Red Book of Westmarch, that was written by Bilbo Baggins. See, while he was in Rivendell, he finished writing what would become The Hobbit, and he came across records of the elves in Rivendell of the history of the Silmarils, the creation of Arda, and he translated those and added those into his book, and that's how we come to know the Silmarillion. So thank you, Bilbo Baggins. This would not have been possible without you. This whole shelf, really. Except for the poetry. I'm pretty sure that's canonically still Tolkien's. And Beowulf. I don't think Bilbo wrote Beowulf. All that is said regarding this battle to the elves is that it devolved into a vicious cycle of creation and destruction. The Valar would try to build something, Melkor would tear it down or burn it, just the whole thing. They kept trying to prepare the land for the children of Ilúvatar, but Melkor kept foiling their plans. Yet, little by little, bit by bit, despite Melkor's best efforts, the world was made. And this is the story of creation as it is told in the Ainulindalë. That is where the story ends. This sets up the creation of Arda and the divine purpose behind it. And it also introduces us to the main divine vehicles that carry through this story, and that is the Valar. And we'll get more exposition on them in just a second. And perhaps most importantly, we are introduced to the main antagonist of the Silmarillion, as well as Tolkien's Satan equivalent, Melkor. His fall from grace is even very similar to the devil in works like Paradise Lost, where he began as a divine being with good purpose, but his own pride and selfishness corrupted him into self-serving deeds, and now he just wants to drag everyone else down with him, or if not, just burn it all. But through all of this, there is one constant, and that is the perfect will of Eru Ilúvatar. It is clear that everything that unfolds in this great plan, in this great melody, whether good or evil, will only serve to glorify Eru and his creation. It is clear that he has a plan for the world which he names Ea. Some of that plan the Valar are aware of, and some of it will be revealed in due time. Only Eru possesses full knowledge and full comprehension of what is to come, because only he understands the wholeness of the melody. But all the pieces are now in place. The Valar have stepped into creation and are building a paradise for the coming of the children of Ilúvatar. Melkor is also there, seeking to destroy everything they create and dominate the land and all that grows within it. And so the Valar fight with one hand and create with the other. But who are the Valar who chose to step into creation? What are their names? I sure hope we can get a very long list. And your prayers have been answered, because now we move on to the Valaquenta, or the account of the Valar and the Maiar according to the wisdom and the records of the Eldar. The Eldar are elves. It's a group of elves. We're going to talk about the different groups of elves later in this series. There's a lot being teed up right off the bat. This next chapter, the Valaquenta, is exclusively extra lore about all of the Valar who step into the world, and the Maiar, and we'll learn about those in a bit. There is no narrative to this chapter, it is just character names and details, but still presented with Tolkien's impeccable penmanship. And since these are just going to be a bunch of names thrown at you real quick, I am going to present all of this information in whiteboard format. The Valar are the powers of the world. The elves know their nature as spirits of Arda, but men often mistake them for gods. And in total there are 14 Valar, 7 kings and 7 queens. There was once 15 Valar, but Melkor is officially no longer counted among the Valar. And his name is not even spoken in the earth, because he's evil. And like I've said before, the greatest of the Valar is Manwë. He was the brother of Melkor and most dear to Ilúvatar. And like I said earlier, his delight was in the clouds and the skies and the great winds of the earth. And all birds come and go at his pleasure. Manwë was appointed the first king, lord of all Arda. So of all the Valar, he is greatest. And his spouse was Varda, Lady of the Stars. Her great joy is in light, and it is said by the Eldar that the light of Ilúvatar is ever reflected on her face. In other words, she's like bathed in this divine radiance that the elves really like. They love light. Nothing that happens on Arda escapes her sight. And of all the Valar, Melkor arguably hates and fears Varda the most. Back before the Song of the Ainur, the Ainulindalë, had transpired, he had pursued her, and she rejected him. Manwë and Varda live in their dwelling atop Taniquetil, the highest mountain peak in all of Arda. There is a mountain range in the land of Valinor called the Pelori, which is, I believe, on the eastern shores of Valinor. And the highest mountain of these is Taniquetil, where they live. And it is from here that Arda's power couple are able to oversee everything. And we get this very beautiful description of how their unique skill sets complement each other so well. It's no wonder that these two ended up with each other. With Varda's light at his side, Manwë is able to see the furthest reaches of the world. Nothing can escape his sight. Similarly, with Manwë at her side, who controls the winds, she is able to hear all that transpires in all the earth, brought to her upon the winds of her husband. I just love this model of a perfect union between these two spirits of creation, between these two great powers in the world. Each has a very unique, very different skill set, yet it complements the other. And of all the Valar, the elves revere Varda the best, whom they call Elbereth. And in my video that I did a while ago talking about my experience reading The Fellowship of the Ring for the first time, I described this really powerful song that Galadriel sang in farewell to the Fellowship as they passed out of Lothlorien never to return. But just before they fade out of sight, she sings this song of farewell. And in that song, she mentions Varda by name, as she mourns for the land of Valinor, a land that is lost to the peoples of Middle-earth. And reading the Silmarillion for the first time, that was a really cool, full circle moment for me. Next in the list of Valar is Ulmo. Ulmo took no spouse, and dwells most often, like I said, in the depths of the sea. And in terms of power, he is second only to Manwë. Although that's not counting Melkor, because Melkor is no longer considered a Valar, but he was the greatest and most powerful of the Valar. That's why when it's all the Valar against Melkor, it's actually a fairly balanced fight. Sorry, I was talking about Ulmo. And he is very, very rarely seen on land unless he is urgently needed in the Council of the Valar. And rarely, like I said, does he take on mortal form, often preferring to appear as this terrifying colossus from the deep. Most often, if the children of Ilúvatar see him, he is in his divine form, great and terrible as a mighty wave, crowned in a dark helm. And while he resides in the deep, his voice can be heard by all who have access to water, for all of water falls under his domain, from the rain in the sky to the little springs in the earth to the sundering sea that separates Valinor and Middle-earth. And that's also how information travels to him. He knows everything that's going on because his domain is everywhere. And slightly lesser in power than Ulmo is Aule. Aule's domain is all of the substance of the earth, from the soil and the rock to the minerals and gems and precious metals. He was also the first smith of Arda and a master craftsman. Not just craftsmanship in terms of forging, metal, steel, iron, all that stuff. He was a craftsman of all trades, from woodworking to metallurgy, to other crafts, I'm sure, that exist. And it is from him that the Noldor elves gained their talent for craftsmanship. Who are the Noldor elves? I don't know, maybe we'll see them later in this series. And Melkor was always very jealous of Aule because the two of them were so alike. Like I said, the main difference is that Melkor would jealously hoard and covet the things that he made and was jealous of the creations of others, whereas Aule's love was in the act of making itself. That was where he got his fulfillment. And so there was lots of struggle and strife between the two, where Aule would build something, Melkor would destroy it in his wrath and jealousy, and Aule would rebuild it. Both also desired to make things of their own that should be new and unthought of by others, and delighted in the praise of their skill. But Aule remained faithful to Eru, and submitted all that he did to his will, and he did not envy the works of others, but sought and gave counsel, whereas Melkor spent his spirit in envy and hate, until at last he could make nothing save in mockery of the thought of others, and all their works he destroyed if he could. And Aule was married to a Valar by the name of Yavanna, the giver of fruits. Her domain was all of the things that grow upon the earth, from the great trees of Arda to the moss that covers the stones. And you can see now why that makes her and Aule such a great pair. Not to say their marriage is perfect, but that's a topic for another video. And the elves revere her nearly as much as they do Varda herself, for her role in making the land as beautiful as it is. Her physical form most often is that of a tall woman in green robes, although she also does take on some rather interesting other forms. In the form of a woman, she is tall and robed in green, but at times she takes other shapes. Some there are who have seen her standing like a tree under heaven, crowned with the sun, and from all its branches there spilled a golden dew upon the barren earth, and it grew green with corn. But the roots of the tree were in the waters of Ulmo, and the winds of Manwë spoke in its leaves. Kementari, Queen of the Earth, she is surnamed in the Eldarin tongue. So most often she's wandering the earth in the form of like a woman, tall, beautiful, the whole thing. And then other times she's just a tree. A really nice tree, but a tree. A lot of the Valar are given surnames or titles by the elves, but it's probably easy enough as it is to get lost in all of the names that I'm throwing at you, so we're gonna disregard those. Next, we have two Valar who were siblings to each other, Namo and Urmo. These two are also sometimes named after the lands in which they reside, Mandos and Lorien. Namo dwells in the halls of Mandos, which is in the western regions of Valinor. These are the halls of the dead, and Namo is that Hades equivalent I was talking about earlier. He summons the spirits of the dead and judges their worth, but only at the behest of their king Manwë. He does not forget anything, and he knows all that will happen, save for things that are hidden to all but the mind of Ilúvatar. But of all the Valar, Mandos, or Namo, probably knows the most. And he is married to Vaire, the Weaver. She is ever weaving the story of Arda into a tapestry that fills the halls of Mandos, which are ever growing. So if Namo is Hades, then Vaire is kind of like the Fates in Greek mythology, but if there was only one fate instead of three, and if she just recorded history instead of predicting it. Maybe she predicts it. Maybe that's why Mandos knows so much, because he looks at his wife's tapestries and is like, oh, look out for 2001, I guess. And Namo's brother, Urmo, also called Lorien, is master of dreams and visions. And like I said, he dwells in Lorien, the vast gardens in Valinor. And he is married to Este, the Gentle, healer of all wounds and weariness. Some of the Valar get more explanation than others. That's why it seems like I'm speedrunning through them now. Some of the Valar are more important to the grander story than others. But all of them are important. They are all kings and queens in Arda. So back to Urmo's wife, Este. She blesses people with rest, and her husband, Urmo, blesses them with dreams. And when the Valar grow weary from their toils and their tasks of shaping the land of Arda, they often come to the gardens of Lorien, where Urmo and Este bring healing and renewal to them. But more powerful than Este is a Valar named Nienna. Nienna is the sister of Namo and Urmo, and she took no spouse. She has no physical or metaphysical role like her brothers and sisters, but her position is arguably one of the more unique ones among the Valar. And honestly, I think the best way to describe her and her role in the goings-on of Middle-earth is to just read her description from the book, so I'm gonna do that. Mightier than Este is Nienna, sister of the Feanturi, The Feanturi is a name given to Namo and Ermo, the two brothers, and she is their sister. Mightier than Este is Niena, sister of the Feanturi. She dwells alone. She is acquainted with grief, and mourns for every wound that Arda has suffered in the marring of Melkor. So great was her sorrow as the music unfolded, that her song turned to lamentation long before its end, and the sound of mourning was woven into the themes of the world before it began. But she does not weep for herself, and those who hearken to her learn pity and endurance in hope. Her halls are west of west, upon the borders of the world, and she comes seldom to the city of Valamar where all is glad. She goes rather to the halls of Mandos, which are near to her own, and all those who wait in Mandos cry to her, for she brings strength to the spirit and turns sorrow to wisdom. The windows of her house look outward from the walls of the world. Her role is that of grief and pity, not for herself, but for the whole of creation, the world as it could have been without the marring of Melkor. A mourning that goes so deep it was sung in the Ainulindalë and is woven into the very fabric of creation. And those who listen to her learn ideas of empathy, wisdom, pity, and she often brings comfort to the souls that reside in the halls of Mandos. And she also has a very, very influential role in the history of Middle-earth, but we'll get to that later. In this video, but later. Next in the list, we have Tulkas. In terms of physical prowess and strength, Tulkas has no equal, and he delights in contests of strength like wrestling. And he has no need of a horse because he is so swift of foot he can outrun any steed on the earth. He was the very last of the Ainur to step into creation and become a Valar, and he did so to aid them in the defeat of Melkor. And he doesn't really care for counsel, preferring swift action. However, he is a very hardy and loyal friend. And Tulkas is also really just like a jolly old fellow. Whether he is wrestling or waging war, he is usually doing so with laughter in his voice. And his spouse is Nessa, the sister of Orome. Orome is another Valar we're gonna get to. Nessa is also really light of foot, and she can often be seen either running alongside the deer or dancing alone in the forest. That's really all that's said about her. She is the Valar of running really fast and dancing. And now for her brother Orome. He is lesser in strength than Tulkas, but far greater in his wrath. And when the rest of the Valar at last made their home in Valinor, he was one of the last to leave Middle-earth. And even after they made their dwelling in Valinor, he always came back to Middle-earth. Orome is a hunter of monsters and fell beasts. Orion the hunter, Orome the hunter. You get it. And he delights most in horses and dogs and trees. He has a horse. He rides a really nice horse. And it's to the degree that he is often called the Lord of the Forest, even though Yavanna is the grower of said forest. He rides a mighty horse and he carries with him a hunting horn. And in the forests of Valinor, he trains his spirits to go on hunting raids with him. And he is very specialized at this point in the disposal of the many monsters and beasts that are the devising of Melkor. And Orome's spouse is Vanna, the younger sister to Yavanna. And Vanna is the Disney princess of the Valar. Wherever she walks, flowers bloom and the birds sing at her arrival. And that's pretty much it. And these are all the Valar, as well as brief descriptions of roughly what they are, who they are. And of the 14, there are 9 Valar that are called the Aratar. These are the greatest and most powerful of the Valar, and the Valar are the greatest and most powerful of the Ainur. And so the Aratar are held in positions of even higher reverence than the rest of the Valar. And actually, one of these Aratar was Melkor, so now there are only 8 Aratar. The Aratar are Manwë and Varda, Ulmo, Yavanna and Aule, Mandos, Niena, and Orome. But the greatest of these, as I've already said, is Manwë, for he was made king of Arda and therefore of all creation. And then the chapter continues by explaining who the Maiar are. And I think the best way to describe the Maiar is by reading their section in the chapter. With the Valar came other spirits, whose being also began before the world, of the same order as the Valar, but of less degree. These are the Maiar, the people of the Valar, and their servants and helpers. Their number is not known to the elves, and few have names in any of the tongues of the children of Ilúvatar. For though it is otherwise in Aman, in Middle-earth the Maiar have seldom appeared in form visible to elves and men. When Eru created the Ainur from his thought, there was not a distinction made between them, except maybe in terms of power scaling, but they were all the Ainur. But we do come to find out that all the Ainur were not created equal. They all vary in individual power and have specific giftings. But in the halls of Ilúvatar, they were all Ainur. But for those who step into creation and are therefore bound to it, they become something else. The most powerful of these spirits become the Valar, the powers of the world. And the Maiar are lesser spirits who are sent to aid the Valar. So I hope that makes sense. Both Valar and Maiar are all Ainur. Valar and Maiar are the distinction made for the ones who are sent into the world and are bound to it. And the Valar are greater than the Maiar. And few of the Maiar are given names in the records of the elves, but we do get some, beginning with Ilmare and Eonwe. Ilmare is the handmaid of Varda, and Eonwe is the banner-bearer and herald of Manwe. But of the Maiar known to the children of Ilúvatar, there are two that are arguably most known among them, and those two are Ossë and Uinen. Ossë is a vassal of Ulmo, master of all the seas that wash against the shores of Middle-earth. That is his domain. And Uinen is his spouse, lady of the seas of Arda. Ossë often had a violent temperament, and it is Uinen who was often able to calm him. And for that, the people of the island city of Númenor, which we will get to later in this series, would often revere Uinen on almost equal ground to the Valar themselves. And there's actually a lot of drama with Ossë in this section. The Ossë situation is crazy. See, Melkor hated the sea because it was the one thing, the one aspect of creation he could not twist and warp to his evil. And so instead, he sought to dominate the seas by corrupting Ossë to his side, the same way that he corrupted so many other Maiar, and we'll get to that in a second. And for a time, it actually worked. Ossë turned on creation, and he summoned up great waves to destroy the land of Arda. And it was only his wife Uinen that was able to stop him, and she brought him before Ulmo, who pardoned him. And since then, his allegiance has not wavered, though he is still imperfect. But Uinen, at the prayer of Aule, restrained Ossë and brought him before Ulmo, and he was pardoned and returned to his allegiance, to which he has remained faithful, for the most part, for the delight in violence has never wholly departed from him, and at times he will rage in his willfulness without any command from Ulmo his lord. Therefore those who dwell by the sea or go up in ships may love him, but they do not trust him. And that is the in-universe explanation for why the seas are a source of beauty and life for the peoples of Middle-earth, but also a source of danger. Ships capsize, waves destroy land masses, and that's why, because Ossë has a violent temperament. Another Maiar who is specifically named in this chapter is Melian, and she served both Vana and Este. Vana was the Disney princess one, and Este was the healer who dwelt in the forests of Lorien. And before Melian went to Middle-earth, she would often tend the gardens of Lorien, and the nightingales sang wherever she went. And the last of the named Maiar in this chapter who were not corrupted to Melkor's side is a spirit by the name of Olorin. And I think that he is best described by his description in the book. Wisest of the Maiar was Olorin. He too dwelt in Lorien, but his ways took him often to the house of Nienna, and of her he learned pity and patience. Of Melian much is told in the Quenta Silmarillion, but of Olorin that tale does not speak. For though he loved the elves, he walked among them unseen, or in form as one of them, and they did not know whence came the fair visions or the promptings of wisdom that he put into their hearts. In later days he was the friend of all the children of Ilúvatar, and took pity on their sorrows, and those who listened to him awoke from despair, and put away the imaginations of darkness. Olorien was the wisest of the Maiar, and that was because he often listened to the voice of Nienna, the mourner, and he could often be seen with the children of Ilúvatar disguised as an elf. He took pity on them, and all who heard his voice, all who heard him speak, would see their sorrow and despair transformed into renewed hope. And the reason that I put so much emphasis on talking about Nienna earlier in this chapter is because of her relationship and her mentorship of Olorien, because she was the Valar who had the longest lasting impact on the mind, thoughts, and actions of Olorien. And Olorien would become one of the most influential Maiar spirits for the good of all of Arda in the Third Age of Middle-earth, because one day Olorien would be sent forth to the children of Ilúvatar to aid them against the evil that was rising in the east. He would be given mortal form and come to be known by many names in Middle-earth, but the one that we most often know him by is Gandalf. As for the other Istari that are sent to Middle-earth, nothing is said here and won't be said until the very end of the book, so we've got a long way to go. But as I said, some of the Maiar were corrupted, their spirits twisted and warped by the thought and deed of Melkor, and they joined him in his quest to destroy and dominate the land of Arda. And the first few paragraphs really give us a great synopsis of Melkor as a character, so I'm just gonna let Tolkien cook once more. I hope you'll indulge me. Last of all is set the name of Melkor, he who arises in might. But that last name he has forfeited, and the Noldor, who among the elves suffered most from his malice, will not utter it. And they name him Morgoth, the dark enemy of the world. Great might was given to him by Ilúvatar, and he was coeval with Manwë. In the powers and knowledge of all the other Valar he had part, but he turned them to evil purposes, and squandered his strength in violence and tyranny. For he coveted Arda and all that was in it, desiring the kingship of Manwë, and dominion over the realms of his peers. From splendor he fell through arrogance to contempt for all things save himself, a spirit wasteful and pitiless. Understanding, he turned to subtlety in perverting to his own will all that he would use, until he became a liar without shame. He began with the desire of light, but when he could not possess it for himself alone, he descended through fire and wrath into a great burning, down into darkness. And darkness he used most in his evil works upon Arda, and filled it with fear for all living things. Yet so great was the power of his uprising that in ages forgotten he contended with Manwë and all the Valar, and through long years in Arda held dominion over most of the lands of the earth. But he was not alone, for of the Maiar many were drawn to his splendor in the days of his greatness, and remained in that allegiance down into his darkness, and others he corrupted afterwards to his service with lies and treacherous gifts. And of the Maiar that joined with Melkor, the greatest and most terrible of them were known as the Valaquenta, demons of terrible fire. But the peoples of Middle-earth saw these Valaquenta and called them the Balrogs, the original servants of the Dark Lord Melkor, who will later be called Morgoth, but he's not there yet, so I'm gonna call him Melkor. But of the servants of Melkor, there was one that arose greater than all of them, a Maiar that the elves named Gorthar the Cruel, or by his other name, Sauron. Once, Sauron was devoted to Aule the craftsman, and even as he fell from grace, he never ceased to love making things. Say rings, for example. And Sauron played a major part in all of the evil deeds and deceits of his master Melkor. He was only made less evil than Melkor by the fact that he did at one point serve the Valar, whereas Melkor only ever served his own dark interests. But in after years he rose, like a shadow of Morgoth and a ghost of his malice, and walked behind him on the same ruinous path, down into the void. And thus ends the records of the Eldar regarding the Valar and the Maiar as told in the Valaquenta. And that is also the end of this video. In the Ainulindalë, we are shown a glimpse of Eru's creation of the heavenly hosts, and how they in turn were set the task of singing the world into being. We also learned of the selfishness and the betrayal of Melkor, and how his once noble deeds continued to descend further and further until they were pure base evil. We are given a sense of the layers of understanding that exist within the world, and how only Ilúvatar himself comprehends the full melody, the full scope of this creation that has been set in motion. And in the Valaquenta, we are introduced to the divine powers at work within the earth, shaping the earth. Powers that will be at work throughout the majority of the Silmarillion. Because in the next video, we actually dive into the history of Arda and the history of the Silmarils in the Quenta Silmarillion. And with that said, thank you so much for watching, and I hope that you will enjoy this new series for the channel going forward. And if you're new around here, hello, I'm WhittyGuy. I am a lover of media, whether that be books, movies, online horror, music, and this channel is a place where I talk about all of those interests. And so if you're into that, then please stick around for the rest of this series and for my other projects going forward. For instance, I'm working on this year's Halloween video right now. It's going to be about an analog horror. I'm sure the people who loved my Mandela catalog video will be excited. I'm also in the works on a video about Dune Messiah. I want to release that before the movie comes out. And I've also been thinking about streaming again recently. It's something I haven't done in quite some time, and I might want to get back into it. Nothing huge or consistent throughout the week, because the majority of my time is devoted, of course, to my real life and to making these videos for the YouTube channel. But if I did start streaming again, what would you want to see me do? I could play Subnautica. I know the new one just came out recently, and I haven't played Subnautica before. I don't have thalassophobia or submechanophobia or anything that makes a lot of playthroughs very interesting, but I feel like if I'm being attacked underwater by like a huge monstrosity, I think I could find it in myself to be terrified of that. And for those of you who are interested, I do also have an Instagram account where I post a lot of vinyl content. I collect vinyl records and I play them too. And so I have this kind of like vinyl aesthetic account where I just like post showcasing the collection that I've amassed. So if you're interested in that, it's Witty Spins on Instagram. And if you've noticed, I've also been posting a lot of short form content here on YouTube, as well as Instagram, TikTok. So if you found me from those, hi, welcome here. Hope you enjoy your stay. And of course, speaking of money on the internet, thank you so much to my patrons, Sean, Happy the Knife, and the top tier patrons, RD and Snowy. Thank you so much for supporting the content, supporting my dream of maybe doing this full time one day. And if you want early ad-free access to these videos, as well as sneak peeks at bigger projects that I will have going on from time to time, then consider joining the Patreon. The tiers are outlined on the actual page. But all paying members get credit at the end of my videos. So with all that said, thank you so much for watching, and I will see you next time for the beginning of the Quenta Silmarillion and the story of the beginning of days and the spring of Arda. I hope that you're excited for that, because I know that I am. And cut.